Welcome back, everyone. Dyno Joe here. Today we got the HUSQVARNA 450 Rancher and the STIHL MS271. Both of these are fully ported. I'll show the teardown, porting, muffler mod, everything else. And I dug the old Homelite out. That's a Super XL automatic. We'll see if that one fires up. We'll see if we can get some baseline runs. And hopefully we can do something fun with that in the next couple months. But we'll get some baseline runs on that one. Alright, we got the 450 Rancher and the STIHL 271. Both of these are clamshells. Get these tore down and we'll see what kind of gains porting make. We'll get a muffler mod and porting. Not a lot we can do machine work wise. Well, not a lot I'm going to put the time into. I'm not going to cut the bearing pockets for the seals and everything on these. Just not going to. So we'll see what kind of gains we can get from a muffler mod and regular cylinder porting. There's the filter setup on both of them. Well, that's kind of a wimpy air filter. Not a fan. Now this steel is the adjustable carb. Looks like it has a high end, low needle. Looks like we got the same on the HUSQVARNA. Pull the carb off. Examine carb. Pull the recoil off. This piece out of the way. Take the clutch off. Thinking the oiler might be able to stay, but we might have to take it off. I'm not sure yet. Now we'll take the handlebar off. Got a little wild there. Take the muffler off. Alright, we'll take the flywheel off. Looks like you can just get to the bolt, so we'll try it. Alright, well, now I should be able to pull this right off. Well, that is interesting. Notice this one might have some potential. Alright, we'll throw a rag over that one, tear the HUSQVARNA down. Let's see how old Husky comes apart. It's my first time ever tearing one of these down. Same with the steel. Never been in this design. Alright, get this handle out of the way. Alright, handle should pop off. Muffler's a 5. Whoops. Muffler's a 5mm. Another empty can. Plenty of room to mod this one. Alright, let's figure out this carb plate and stuff. Now the Husky's a Strato type saw. Has a fresh air butterfly and a fuel mix butterfly. So as far as the porting goes, I don't know. I'm feeling more confident about the steel being the better runner, but we'll see. This little Husky might surprise us. Well, we'll see what can actually be done with these clamshell designs. Pop the throttle cable out. And the carb should come out. This is the Husky carb on the right. That's the steel carb on the left. I'm feeling much better about this steel running better, but it's a little heavy and a little underpowered to begin with. So we're going to try and fix it. That's a bitty baby carb on this little Husky. The Husky also has this extra butterfly just for fresh air, so it can get the air in, and if it can flow enough fuel, it might make up for it, but we'll see. Oh, coil's on the cylinder on this one. Pull the coil, just get out of the way. It's not 100% necessary, but I'm going to pull the flywheel just to make it easier to clean. Move the nut and they pop right off. Look at that. Get the sparky plug out, and I think it'll be ready to pull the cylinder. Same thing, 4 bolts hiding under here. Alright, should just pull straight up. Oh, crank came with it. Stay in there, cranky. Well, these don't really look like sealing. It looks like they have some kind of a sealing ring, which I like. I'll be able to reuse that. Pull this intake boot masterpiece off. Here's the Husky intake. Top 2 ports are the straddle ports, just fresh air. Bottom one is where the fuel air mix go. Take the boot off the steel real quick. Husky on the right, steel on the left. Husky uses formed O-ring inserts. The steel you make your own with the gasket maker. Husky intake with the straddle. Steel intake, just a regular intake port. You can see this is why they're called clamshells. Top half of the bearing pocket is in the cylinder, bottom half is in the case. Some of them even have a pan where the whole engine is one piece. Crank and all can go out of the case. Husky intake, the lower ports there are the fresh air ports. The uppers are transfers. And there's the exhaust. Transfers feed from here. So it looks like that can be notched out a little bit. Kind of like the steel. You can see the steel feeds the same way. Transfers are notched out pretty good. Steel's a quad port upper. Exhaust isn't horrible. And there's the intake. So we'll see what we can do with these. I'll get the rings off, get them cleaned up, and we'll time them real quick. Alright, got the wheel on the 450. And fingers crossed, but I don't think we got a lot we can do with this one. Intake 71, exhaust 102, transfers 115. Short blowdown, strato, same approach they use on their 5 series. I'll see what I can do widening the exhaust. I don't want to raise it. 50cc needs all the power stroke it can have. I'll see if I can just open up the lowers, open up the transfers, leave the timing numbers alone, maybe give it a little more intake. I have to see if it gets into the impulse notch or not. Might have to notch the piston, but that's the HUSQVARNA. So we'll time the steel, see where that's at. Alright, got this intake 67, exhaust 105, exhaust side transfer 117, intake side 120. I kind of like those numbers for 50cc. I'll give it some more intake, widen things out. Since we're not adding any compression, we'll just have to see what we can get with widening and making things flow better on both of these builds. On the Husky, I'd really like to, if I could, I'd lower those cylinder down a little bit, add a little bit longer power stroke. The steel, honestly, if I could add some more compression to this one, I think it could be a ripper for a plastic saw. Alright, so we'll get both these laid out, do some grinding, and see if we can make things better. Alright, here's a look at the steel cylinder. That little nub you see on the top of the intake, that's to keep the ring locating pin. That's to keep the end gaps from falling in. That's why that's there. That'll have to stay. I am going to lower this intake port, and I'll leave a sealing surface around the impulse passage. So it'll look kind of funny, but you can see this is about 65% wide. These are very conservative intake and exhaust ports on the STIHL. Transfer's already notched out. I'll notch and blend that a little bit more. You can see up there on the exhaust, very narrow from the factory. And that's how they keep the power down. That's how they keep the longevity up. A super small port can hold up to homeowner type abuse. Bad fuel, dull chains. So I'm going to widen that out. I'm not going to raise any of these ports. I'll leave the transfers the way they are. So we'll widen the intake and exhaust, lower the intake. Now here's the HUSQVARNA cylinder. I'm going to remove this area, open it up like what the STIHL is. You can see in there another tiny exhaust port stock. So we'll widen this to the same 65%. On the intake, I have just enough room to lower it down to get me in the low to mid 70s. You can see these castings leave a little bit to be desired. There was a little boo-boo here from assembly. So I'll clean up that kind of stuff. And if you look at the transfer there, that gray color off to the right side of the transfer, that's the transfer cap. So I'm going to open and shape that, but I'm not going to change the transfer timing or exhaust height on this. I'm just going to open this spot, widen the exhaust, a little more intake timing and transfer areas. All this husk these ground out, put back together, and see if we can make more power. All right, here's the 450 Rancher cylinder. Opened up those lowers, widened the exhaust. I did have a little bit of tune up on the straddle port there, and I lowered the intake a little bit. This one was 78 intake, 102 exhaust, 115 transfers. I widened the transfers just a little bit. There's a piece that sticks in there. Can't really see it from that angle. The transfer cap sticks in. It was a nice huge square, so opened it up to let it flow. But get this one put back together. This uses these rubber seals. I didn't see any real sealant on this base, so I'll clean it up. And I'll use some of my Hylamar on it. I'll put a dab of oil in the cylinder. Well, really not too bad. Line everything else back up. Did loosen the tank, make it a little bit easier. Get these in. Loosened up this front tank bolt to make it a little easier to get these bolts in. Alright, those are good and snug. Tighten this bolt back up. Looky there, it even goes roundy still. Cover back on. That way, I can lay out the muffler mod. Alright, 450, all back together. Alright, get a nice healthy muffler mod on the PTO side. Right in that area. Get the HUSQVARNA out of the way, we'll put the STIHL back together. Then we'll mod both mufflers at the same time. Here's the finished port work on the STIHL. Widen the exhaust. And I did lower and widen the intake. I left a little bit of sealing surface for the impulse port. I heard you don't have to, but I did. So we'll leave this one. We'll get this cleaned up, stuck down, see how it is. 35 on the intake, 105 exhaust, 117, 120 transfers. Just blended the lower a little bit, widen the exhaust, Didn't touch the transfers, widen and lower the intake a little. So we'll see how this one fares. Put the flywheel back on. Boot pop through. Fuel line in, throttle rod in. Oh, let's get rid of these limiters. I didn't even look. Nope. Just spline screws on the Husky. Alrighty, got the carb limiter pulled out of the high side. And it has a 2mm Allen. Get the recoil back on. We'll put an outlet on this side. Get both of these mufflers done. Then we'll be ready to hit the dyno. Working on getting the boring machine dialed in. Alrighty, punch the holes in the cans. Got those deburred. Now we'll fit some deflectors. These are my mediums. Need your deflectors. Some snips, pliers, hammer, some more pliers. Start with a rough outline. These are just 20 gauge mild steel, cut real easy with hand snips. I like to try and keep the outlet flat with the front of the muffler. That way there's not too much that has to come off. And then you just bend and tweak and fit until it's nice and flat where you can weld it on. Alright, that one fits on there real nice. Doesn't really stick out past the front of the muffler. Tuck in beside the brake flag, so I like that. We'll stick that one right there. The steel, a little bit more challenging. Might have to switch to the small deflector on this, but we'll see. Alright. Alright. That one fits pretty well on the steel. So we'll get these brazed on real quick. This is just a TIG braze I use. Throw on a new piece of tungsten. Alright, fresh ground. 2 medium deflectors. Let me fire up the welder. Alright, this is silicon bronze filler rod that I'm using. So this will be a TIG braze. We'll get these stuck down. I'll paint them up. And then we can do some dyno runs. Now we'll do the Husky can. Changed out the tungsten, nice fresh piece. Alright, get those all cleaned up, painted up, I'm ready to go. Being these are plastic case, I wanted to make sure this back seam was sealed up, just so the gas doesn't melt the case. But these being opened up like that, they ought to flow a lot better. Should let a lot of the heat out. Alright, get both of these cans put back on and fire these up. What do you think, STIHL or Husky? Fingers crossed we actually gained something out of these little clammies. Alright, muffler tucked in there, ever just so. I went with a little bit larger deflector with the medium. I probably could have got away with a small, but I wanted it to extend past the brake flag when it's tripped. That way all the air, hot gases are shooting out away from the brake flag. Don't want to melt that. Now this is the 346 drum, and this is the 450 Rancher worm for the oiler. You can see the splines are a little bit bigger. They're made for the spur. These have just enough to engage, but I wouldn't recommend it. 325 sprocket that fits this worm. You can see it fits just right. 346 drum does work, but if you run real thick oil, maybe in the winter, has a likelihood of stripping out. Put the drum on with 3/8 rim and we'll fire it up. I'll put the side cover on to cinch this clutch down with the brake. HUSQVARNA flippy cap, STIHL flippy cap. Which ones do you guys like? Alrighty. See if these fire up. Oh no, that little Husky don't sound bad for a homeowner saw. Let's fire up the steel. A little bit of tuning left on the steel, but they're ready to hit the dyno. 450 Rancher, full of fuel and oil. 12 pounds, 6.4 ounce. There's the metric. MS271, full of fuel and oil. 13 pounds, 12.3 ounces. There's the metric. Alright, this might be a little bit newer, but it's still an oldie. So we'll feel this one up, see if we can get it fired up. This was probably my first or second saw. So, like a lot of people that are looking at these 271s, 450 Ranchers, regular Ranchers, most people are probably coming from a saw like this that you pick up at a garage sale. So we'll top it off and see if I can get it fired up. We'll put it on the dyno, see what kind of power it makes. Then we can see the modern stuff versus the old stuff. been sitting at least 4 or 5 years. So it'll be a miracle if it fires up. But we'll see. Honestly, that was very shocking. I don't think either one of these other saws would do that after it sit for 4 or 5 years, but could be wrong. So we'll get this one put on the dyno just to compare. All right, here's the 450 Rancher. There's the muffler mod up close. Nice big scoop. Not a bad looking saw. There's the STIHL muffler mod, 271. What do you think? 271 versus 450. Which one you got? Which one's your favorite? Alright, here's the results. Ported 271 up top. Ported 450 Rancher. Stock 271. Stock Rancher. And the Super XL. Torque horsepower's over here. I'll show that graph in a second. But 271, 4.84 horse at 9,000. 450 Rancher, 4.13 horse, 9,000. Rancher's only up about 16%. 271 is up about 26%. You can see the old school torque and horsepower, they almost matched, but they're way back here. So I'll show that on its own graph. But not being able to do machine work, just adding some port area, you can see the larger carb of the 271 really helps it run out up top. 450 Rancher wants to do something, it just doesn't have any carb. With that strato and the small carb, it just kind of flat lines, not a lot going on. Can't add a bunch of torque to it by adding the compression. But overall, not too bad. I don't know if it's worth the effort to tear down the clamshells like that. But 271 definitely makes decent power. Did come out on top like we thought. So we'll look at the Homelite real quick. Alright, here's the Homelite graph. Flat and flat. Torque's the blue line, red line's horsepower. Peaks at 3.5 horse. And peak torque 3.26. Almost as much torque as horsepower. So we'll see what we're going to do with this. I don't know. Have to play through a couple different ideas, but it will be back. This is the baseline for it. Alright, thanks a lot everyone.